Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to the next agenda, which is agenda item, which is item 1 on our agenda for public and for public hearing and discussion. Item 1 is the Rancheria 2019-13 extension of the approval on October 21st, 2020 for a grading permit and design review for the Trinidad Harbor Asbs Stormwater Runoff Management and Green Infrastructure Enhancement Project. That's a mouthful. Trevor?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission approved this project in October 2019, or 2020, sorry. It is a project that the Rancheria has been working on for a while to eliminate their stormwater discharge. So just like the city back in 2002, I think it was, we all got cease and desist discharge orders from the water board because of the Trinidad Asbs. The cities was because of the stormwater outfall. The Rancheria was because of runoff from the parking lot and the pier. They replaced the pier. Now they're working on doing vegetation projects in the parking area. That discharge. The permitting and funding process is taking a bit longer than expected. So the Planning Commission's approval was for 2 years with the option to grant an extension. They are working through the coastal development permit process with the Coastal Commission. So I know that they are actively still working on the project, and they have requested an extension. In reviewing that, I did notice that the condition for 2 years was missing a line, so it looked like maybe approval of the project entirely was only for 2 years, but it's really until it's vested in terms of construction. So I would recommend that you go ahead and make the extension for another 2 years with the amendment to condition 2 as noted. And I'm happy to take any questions. It looks like Ron Sundberg is here from the Rancheria as well.
Yep. I think it's just, in my opinion, pretty straightforward, but I would certainly like to hear from Mr. Sundberg if you would like to make any comments prior to opening the discussion to the commissioners. Ron?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having a really time hearing. I'm on my cell phone. So yeah, we've been working really hard trying to get this coastal development permit. We thought we were going to be on the agenda for September for approval. In late August, the Coastal Commission came back with some more information requested regarding our rock slope protection. We moved very quickly through that process to provide a response to them, and I've sent the response, and we're waiting to find out if we're going to be on the November agenda. Once that coastal development permit is approved, we can go on to the next phase of this project, which is, the putting together the bid documents and stuff, in hopes that we can get this project under construction, hopefully this summer. So we would definitely appreciate a extension in your guys' permitting.
Thank you for the comments. Any questions or comments from the commissioners for Ron? Go ahead.
I'd just like to say that the Rancheria and the construction workers have been doing a really good job. I cruise town quite a bit to see what's in the parking lot and in the city. And they've been working hard. In fact, they were even working in the rain one day or maybe 2 days. And the equipment looked really good. And on the way down, Galindo and around that corner, they had workers with flags and cones. And I just think that what they were doing was really good. And I would like to see them, get an extension so that they can finish this, because we're all hoping for a lot of water.
Yeah, so definitely we are too. And if this project is completed, we'll be happy, very proud to announce that we've pretty much met all of the conditions with the area of special biological significance and the prohibited discharges. So this is kind of our last major hurdle to comply with that. So very excited about this project and hoping, fingers crossed, that we can get moving on it soon. So it's been quite a process.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the Rancheria for the thorough plans and how well it's laid out. And if you happen to have an opportunity to put something up to show the community what's going to happen, there's a lot of people asking what's going to happen, when's it going to happen. But it's a really nice plan, and really thank you for all that you're doing there.
Yes, and I can comment on that. We actually, once we move through the permitting phase, part of our grant requirements is to hold a kind of a public meeting down there to walk the project and show the community what the project consists of. So there will definitely be some community engagement there.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments from the commissioners? Okay, I will at this point open it up for any public comment. And hearing none, I'll bring it back then to the commissioners for any final remarks and or a motion.
I'll make one more final remark. The Rancheria and the construction workers had that area really roped off well, and it was real busy in the summer. And they just had it roped off and regulated so that the tourists couldn't get in there. A couple of them started parking up the hill a little bit on the way down, but they really did a good job to keep everybody out so that their construction machines and the workers could work. And I thank you for that, because sometimes we've got doors open in the streets, we've got trucks out there, we don't have any cones, and people are coming around corners. So thank you.
Sorry, I did have one kind of informal comment / request for the Rancheria. If, I don't know, in about a year's time, if you're still running up against just challenges, and I appreciate all these are well out of your direct control, just maybe circle back and give us a heads up just so we can kind of be aware in case folks ask us, as they do from time to time.
Of course, we'd be happy to, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Sounds like a good idea. Yeah. Anything else? We entertain a motion?
Sure. I'll make one. Based on the fact that the conditions have not substantially changed and the fact that the Rancheria is continuing to actively pursue all the necessary permits and funding, I move to extend the approval for a grading permit and design review for the Trinidad Harbor Asbs Stormwater Runoff Management and Green Infrastructure Enhancement Project with the following modification to condition number 2. Based on the findings that the community values may change in a year's time, approval is for a 2-year period starting at the effective date and expiring thereafter unless construction has commenced or an extension is requested from the Planning Commission prior to that time.
I'll second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Sundberg. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Yes, thank you guys. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, next item on our agenda is the housing-related zoning ordinance update, discussion regarding a zoning ordinance amendment to add provisions for reasonable accommodations to the zoning ordinance. Trevor?
Thank you. So this was continued from the last meeting. I didn't have time to get to it. This is another housing-related zoning ordinance amendment. So this one is a leap grant funded tax. One of the implementation programs in the housing element is to develop some provisions for reasonable accommodation. It is something, again, that's required by state law, and it's something that we have run up against in the past as a planning commission. We do not have any kind of exception process for zoning ordinance standards other than a variance. Variance findings are very limiting, so they're really for physical limitations of the land, and so don't really provide for alterations to accommodate disability. So that's basically what this is under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, they do have a right to have some modifications to zoning ordinance standards for reasonable accommodation. So this would be something like a handicap wheelchair access ramp that doesn't need a front yard setback or a side yard setback, something like that. So that is the purpose of the amendment. I used an ordinance that I found, some examples that had been certified by the Coastal Commission. So that's what this is based on. I have also sent it to the Coastal Commission for review and comment, but I haven't heard back from them. So it would just be a new section in the zoning ordinance. And I think it's pretty straightforward for providing that approval. And I had a couple of comments in the ordinance that I'd like to get some feedback from the planning commission on. And other than that, I am happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. Normally what we would do is we would just kind of go through maybe page by page, but before we do that, are there any general comments or clarifications that the commissioners would like to get from staff? Yes.
So who is going to okay the reasonable accommodation? Is it going to be you, or is it going to be the building inspector? Or is it going to be
That is one of my questions. So if you look on top of page 6 under review authority, that is one of my questions, is who the review authority should be. So I would like to get some input from the planning commission on whether you think that should come to you, or whether you think that's Eli or myself would probably be the three, or the building official. And it might depend partially on what the request is.
So my view on that is that you should be doing it, because you know the plan, you know the codes, you're here all the time in this element. And so I would, instead of the building official or the city manager or Gabe or Anton making a decision, I believe that you have the knowledge and the background to make this decision. And another incident a while ago, someone was doing a project, not right here, but I can't even remember where, and it didn't get the accommodation for ADA, and they got sued for $10,000. So I'm just telling you that I know that from the past, and just because, I'm in a family with building and design. So my view, and I read this really closely, the zoning ordinance, and it's kind of redundant in certain places, we got to accommodate. And just like you said, they need to get a ramp. They need to make sure it's not going out in the street, but they need to have accessibility. Yeah. So I would prefer that you do it because of your background and your experience.
I did have one general question. and maybe I missed it in here, but how would this apply to properties that have potentially ADU, JADU, STR type properties that also want to make themselves accessible to be open to that group of people? Would they fall under the same kind of expedited accommodation process?
That's a good question. That might have been one of my questions. Yeah,
Oh, is it?
so
Okay.
same page, the next comment. Some of the ordinances I saw, they only allowed a reasonable accommodation if it was the person's primary residence. But it seems like for certainly an ADU, that could be made. It could be made by the owner on behalf of their tenant. Would be one option. STRs, I think that's a question for the planning commission. So that's something I'd like some input.
That's something big to look at. To have SDRs require ADA accessible, whether it's a bathroom or a room or a ramp to get into the building. I just think it's huge. It's just a big deal.
Yeah, I had a question, I guess. I mean, I feel like all we're talking about is wheelchair ramps. Do you have like ideas for other potential developments that could be built on this?
Let's see, we've had a couple of these in Trinidad where we used the variance. It wasn't really real pretty, but one was a ramp. I believe one was converting part of a garage to living space. Was that on Underwood?
Yeah.
And it was so the vehicle could pull up. I forget exactly what it was, but it was living space that was more accessible from a vehicle in the rain and things like that. So that's another example. Interior things would probably be more building code. So I'm thinking, if it's a zoning standard, maybe I would be the reviewer. If it's a building code standard, it would be Ross or the building official that would be the reviewer. So I'll make that clear. I don't really know what else there might be, but I'm sure there's things
Well, one of them would be a larger room, for the occupant, because the bedroom might be an older house. It just might not have a big enough room, to get the wheelchair through the door. So I could see a bigger room, a bigger bathroom, one of those roll-in type showers. So I think besides the ramp, there are those inside issues that would be brought up.
To Tristan's point, we do have a couple 2-story kind of duplex type buildings in town. Could you see an external lift of some kind falling under this kind of a program? I mean, in my mind, it seems like that would be another way. Yeah. Okay. Great.
And the lawyers have looked at it, the city attorneys, and they're going to review it all before it all goes.
But not yet. Usually I have the attorney review it in between the planning commission and city council. So we get it to a pretty final point to minimize the attorney's time.
So all these questions are brought up in my mind. I think what we've been talking about is I don't quite understand the difference between having to comply with ADA requirements and STRs as an example, because one of the things that we say is that a request for reasonable accommodation can be made by any person or any business. And so I guess I'm a little confused as to where is the dividing line between ADA requirements and then reasonable accommodation.
I don't know the applicable, so like a hotel probably has to have a certain percentage of rooms that are accessible, for example. I don't think the same thing applies to STRs. In terms of businesses, I think it has to do with the size of the business and then whether they are doing substantial renovations. I think also starts to kick in certain requirements. So for example, across the street, the new art gallery, they had to have a ADA parking space, that business. It was a new conversion of a use. So the building code kicked in for that.
Yeah, in trying to think this through, in my mind, for businesses, I think that's a separate thing. That's clearly an ADA type of thing, if it's a business. The thing that was a little confusing to me is when we say that a business or property owner, when the application of a zoning law, a building code provision, or other land use regulations, et cetera, acts as a barrier to fair housing opportunities. Now, so if a business owner wanted to apply because of fair housing, then to me, that's where the STRs fit in. And I don't quite understand, if there's nothing that I know in our STR ordinance that deals with accommodation whatsoever. And I just don't know how those two will get connected or if they never get connected. But I get confused on exactly how that would play out.
What page?
Well, actually, the phrase that I'm looking at is on page 3 at the bottom. It's under applicability, the last phrase there. And then
I have it all underlined, right?
And then it goes, of course, to the next page. And it's pretty clear what they're saying is that the application of a business would be only to preclude a barrier to fair housing opportunities, but STRs provide housing. So I don't understand that.
And I mean, technically, I don't have to also apply for a business license or even long-term rental. So I don't know.
Yeah, for a long-term
Within the
rental,
city,
you do have to have
right.
a business license.
I don't know if the STR license is kind of ticks the business license box as well. I don't know, something.
It is a type of business license.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, regardless, for me personally, just speaking, I mean, I think we should have this capture maybe the greatest number of properties to try and ease the process to facilitate access.
So I imagine that, there's sort of a minimum requirement, which is the fair housing. And like I said, I did see some ordinances that required proof that it was the person with disability's primary residence. The approval was only as long as they were living there. But I think you could go beyond that, allow additional exceptions. So if you wanted to include STRs, if someone wanted to make their STR accessible,
Well, I guess from our perspective, it's whether or not that would become a requirement.
at this point, this is voluntary. It would be a request of the property owner.
Okay. Any other general comments? Okay. Is acceptable if we just quickly go through this? Most of this I understand is stuff that we have little control over anyway, but maybe there are some things that we should understand. So let's just plow right through starting on page 1. Any questions or comments on page 1?
Well, I learned that RENA was Regional Housing Need Assessment. I learned that at the workshop. Just missed that forever. I know you knew it, Richard. I didn't. I kept looking at RENA. So that helps when we get the dictionaries or the glossaries and a lot of words here.
I had one other comment on page 1, HP 2.2, which is the very last one there. It says encourage provisions for access for the handicapped. To me, since we're going to this great effort to accommodate fair housing, I do not think that encourage is the right word, something more like ensure or something. But my suggestion would be ensure provisions for access for the handicapped in new or rehabilitated residential commercial development. Anything else on page 1?
So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, the bottom of page 1, HP-2.2.
Now that is something that is in the adopted housing element, I believe,
That's-
check, so.
That was the phrase I used earlier.
Here.
Yeah, I wondered whether or not, any of this wording could be changed. Get it. Anything on page 2?
Just on the first paragraph, it begins, whereas, first full paragraph, HCD, just spelling that out. That's the first time that shows up in the ordinance for the municipal code chapter there.
Okay. Anything else on page 2? Page 3? We had our discussion on eligible applicants at the end of at the bottom of the page. Anything else on page 3? Page 4?
I had one, this kind of, the topic started on page 4 and extends throughout the rest of the document. And just something that I don't know if we have the option, but when it comes to the fees and people trying to make things more accessible, I don't know if we have the ability to lessen the fees, do something to modify them so that can't be used as a barrier or doesn't present itself as a barrier to accommodations for people. And I know that could certainly be a slippery slope to head down, but I think this might be worth looking into.
What number is that there?
Well, for me, it's 1758-030 at the bottom. A, it starts talking about a fee established by residents of the council, and then fees are mentioned several places throughout the rest of the document. And that was just kind of a thought that cropped up when I saw that.
Oh, okay.
An applicant always has an option to go to the city council and request fees be waived or reduced if they think something wasn't fair, but I could certainly make it explicit in here that fees may be waived. Public body would do that.
Anything again on page 4? Move to page 5.
At number 8, that's where you have the shout out that it's the primary residence, which I guess sort of that ties into the discussion we just had, but I'm inclined to keep that in there as only for primary residents, which conflict with the rest of some of the rest of the council.
Well, I guess another situation could be someone's family member that visits regularly. Would you want to allow an exception for that? Is that a fair housing issue? I think that probably goes beyond what the law requires. So that's a question.
I looked at it in somewhat of a similar situation in that someone's primary residence may be somewhere else in the world, and this is a secondary residence. And going to your point is that maybe it's above and beyond what we need to do, but it might be nice to be a little bit more specific there.
Just on that topic, I guess I struggle a little bit with the primary residence requirement, just because it's not somebody's primary residence. I don't know, I have a hard time with us making it not accessible to them. If it's their primary residence in Trinidad, then we'll say yes, but if it's their vacation home and they're still a member of our community and contribute to us, I have a hard time saying no to that.
I guess my thought on it is if it's their second home, I feel the homeowner can work a little bit harder to make their accommodation compliant with the zoning law. Sort of, this is like this. I see this amendment as like we're trying to help people out who are living here maybe it's difficult for them to access their home due to their disabilities, but also there may be like some financial issues. But I guess in my mind, if it's a second home, like they should be able to try harder to make it accessible for themselves. But that's, obviously penalizing the out of towner, which maybe is not the most popular choice, but that's my thoughts on it.
A compromise might be that if it's a primary residence, then it's an administrative approval, and if it's not a primary residence, it's the planning commission.
Because that would be in the STR category with rental.
Or the second.
Yeah, I think that's good. Good idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
That's fine. It personally wouldn't change the outcome for me, whether it's
No, I
ministerial or
understand.
comes to us. I'm still in favor of granting somebody the ability to access their
Agrees.
but
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on page 5?
I had just had one clarification under item C, and I'm sure I'm stating the obvious, but obviously any modifications are not allowed to affect any life safety egress to themselves or adjacent properties, that kind of stuff. Does that need to be explicitly stated or?
Sure.
I mean, if it doesn't, if it's kind of a no-brainer, then I just wanted to bring it up.
That might be a question for the building official. You might know more about that, but I think it certainly wouldn't hurt to have that in here.
Oh, you're talking about D?
No, C, just that, I just want to make sure that if we're, the ramp and the easement affects an adjacent property or some kind of window clearance or requirements. I mean, I can't imagine an accommodation that really is going to impede egress, but if, the elevator tower has to go in front of a lower story window or something or door, you just want to make sure we're thinking about that. That's all.
Anything else on 5? Page 5.
So it says the reviewing authority may impose reasonable conditions of approval necessary to ensure that the required findings can be met. And then they go on D, page 7. Conditions may include.
Page 7?
Yeah, oh, we're not on 7 yet?
We're still on 5.
Oh, okay.
Hold that thought though.
Yeah, well, some of the things are on 6 that you got to talk about.
Well, we're just about to plow into 6. So anything on 6? Your comment, Trevor, regarding whether or not it should be the planning, city planner, building official, et cetera. I kind of resonate with what Diane said earlier. Seems to me that you're the appropriate person, or in your position, that person. You have comments on that? Okay. Any other comments on?
Under findings, letter C. I guess I thought that phrase is sort of maybe counterproductive to the point of this. I guess if it results in an adverse impact on the properties or land uses, like I think isn't the point to like sort of be or allow an exception to like the zoning or the various laws that may apply.
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of a setback is to maintain distance, so I suppose that finding, I think, but I also think that finding might get at what Aaron was talking about in terms of health and safety. So maybe that finding should be worded more specifically in terms of the type of negative impact. Health and safety or something.
And underlined as a concern. So I do think about that.
Yeah, maybe if it was more, I guess like when I read it, I thought of it more as like some sort of like an aesthetic thing. Like I didn't like how the wheelchair ramp looks, so it's.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think,
Maybe if it was more safety oriented.
yeah.
Where's the parking spot going to be? And
I had one comment on under findings E. Says whether the requested accommodations will require fundamental alterations or frustrate application of any city program. Wasn't sure if that was the right word. Frustrate. I think I understand what it's intended to say, but is that a state mandated word? I guess I should ask.
It is pretty common. I can't remember if it's
Okay.
where exactly, if it just comes from ordinance or whether it comes from the state law. Well, it is a little bit awkward wording.
Can't frustrate any of those.
Well, I think, it would make it a little bit easier for me if it said whether the requested accommodation will require fundamental alteration or would frustrate application of any city program. That then would be a little bit more clear to me. It's just the fact that they were making it so overt, like frustrated. Just like I said, maybe it's a state mandated thing. I'm not too worried
Just put
about it.
his little wood in there. He's real good correcting correctly spoken.
Anything else?
I mean, I could see something, something that would impact the septic system or something like that. Get access to inspections of the septic system.
Anything else on page 6? Page 7? You had made a comment on item B. Most ordinances I reviewed did not have a public noticing requirement if the RA is associated with a discrepancy permit. Noticing would be per that process. The way I read that is the way it's written is acceptable. Is that what you're saying?
So I put that in there again. It's another, it's like the primary residence where I added that so that you could see it, but it doesn't have to be in there. This is another one that I had it in there so you could see it, but doesn't have to be in there. So a lot of ordinances did not require any kind of public noticing to neighbors. But some did, so you can, if you think neighbors should have some input into it.
So question on that, relative to other ministerial permits that you issue, how do we notice those currently? If they're
ministerial permits, really the ministerial permit in the city would be something like a building permit. And if it's exempt from design review, and it's just a building permit, then there's no notice. So, if someone's remodeling their kitchen, for example, they need building permits, but they don't need planning permit. The neighbors would not know.
I guess my point with that is kind of to keep it consistent with the way we handle other ones in the city.
So then I would take that out because if the reasonable accommodation were just something that didn't require any kind of discretionary approval, if it were exempt, then we wouldn't notice. If it were associated with like a larger addition or something like that, that would require design review, then that would be noticed like a regular project. So take that out.
Yeah, I support taking it out. I also feel like it would just add additional cost to the applicant.
Anything else on page 7?
Regarding D and F, make sure I understand what my comment here was. Removing the structures afterwards, I feel like they kind of answer each other. D talks about conditions, limiting, once they're not needed to provide accessibility for the applicants. And then I feel like that's covered again in F. Kind of fairly well, that they'll be granted and then it doesn't run with the land. I just didn't know if that was duplication of effort there between those two, if F kind of answered that point in D. And then I had a clarifying question. This applies equally or consistently whether the person is a renter, or does it have to be the property owner, or how does that go?
No, it could be a renter. So the property owner's permission would be needed.
Sure.
And they would probably be the applicant, but on behalf of the renter.
But as far as standing, it doesn't matter who's asking. Okay.
And along with that same paragraph F, once again, we talk about the director. And so I would assume that wherever we see that, that would be the planning person. Okay. Anything else? Anything
So
else?
the accommodations are set of a variance.
Yes, so that's the variance is the only mechanism we have now, but it's very difficult to make those findings.
Anything else on 7? And I think 8 is, anything else on 8? Anything on 8, I should say.
I just had a question. Section 5, you talked about that jurisdictions may need to. Will we need to? I guess is my follow-up question.
Well, I think so, because some of these are certified. Although the person who helped me write this inquired to Coastal Commission staff, and it wasn't our normal staff person, but they said, oh, that doesn't sound like something that would need to go before Coastal Commission. So that's something I still need to confirm. So that's kind of a placeholder for now.
Okay. Anything else on 8?
So you get to make the decisions that we do in the city, not the government,
That's right.
for accommodations for this level. Well, that's good, because it takes forever to get that coastal commission to get out of the road and get going.
Okay, at this point, I'll open it up for public comment. And hearing none, I'll bring it back then to the commission for any final comments on this amendment.
It's just a question. Where does it go from here?
That's what's going to be.
I'm going to work on a
Sorry.
few
That's all.
tweaks and amendments that we discussed tonight. Sounds like a little bit of clarification in some places, and then bring it back to you. Eventually, it'll be a recommendation to the city council. And I will check with the coastal commission. There has to be certified.
Okay.
So are we gonna build a bunch of houses with the money?
No, the LEAP grant, I think, was only like $60,000. 65. Can't build a whole lot.
Okay, next item, agenda item, is the general plan update for the community design element. Discussion of the updated draft of the community design element continued from our February 15th, 2022 meeting. Trevor?
So I was getting ready to bring this to the city council, actually, and I realized, the planning commission actually didn't quite finish with it. So we had been discussing this element for several months, and the discussions, there kept being quite a bit of discussion, but we weren't making a lot of amendments to the design element. So we moved on to the design guidelines, because I think a lot of the discussions were getting kind of bogged down in some of those details. And we were going to revisit this again once we had the design guidelines. Now we have the design guidelines, at least in draft format. Again, I'm waiting for Coastal Commission staff to get back to me about the private versus public use and how we're going to deal with that. But now that you have those design guidelines, it might help give a little bit more perspective on design element of the general plan, which should be more general, with the details in the guidelines.
Yep. Any general questions or comments from the commissioners? So I had one kind of, I don't want to let you call it a philosophical question, I guess. I guess what I was trying to figure out is what would be the process that we could use to kind of have this document as called a placeholder so that we could actually do some actual design review based on the new guidelines to see if they actually work for us. Am I making myself clear?
No, I mean, when we reviewed the Vanderpool project, I mentioned a few of these things. I guess that would be a question for the attorney. I mean, I don't think you can, I think it would be difficult to deny a project based on, guidelines that aren't adopted. But the planning commission does adopt policies. I'll ask the attorney what avenues there might be, because in a sense they supplement the design guidelines that we have. So yeah, and if you use these to come to a conclusion that one of the adopted findings can't be made, I don't think there's anything stopping you from doing that at home. I mean, you can come up with your own matrices and your own kind of how you want to narrow your decision down on those adopted findings. And I think you can use these as they are, but whether we can use them officially, I'll check into that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my feeling is that I would hate to sit down and do have to deal with a design review issue and then go, oh, we should have changed that. And had we had the opportunity before we had approved it, that's all. And maybe there's nothing that we can do or.
Another thing we might be able to do is, I could pull out some plans from some past projects. Could do a mock design review and kind of go through it and discuss how these might apply to those projects. That might be another option.
Yeah, I just, this has been such an important part of our process that I just want to make sure that we get it. I mean, that's personally me speaking. And I just would like to have a little bit more confidence that we've got everything covered.
Is this just for the design element? Is that how you feel?
The design review criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not the other elements?
No, oh no.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
no, I'm not asking to go back to.
Well, no, I was just wondering, because we've been doing this for years.
Yeah, but this comes up over and over again. That's
I
what-
brought a lot of them.
And the Vanderpool project was a good example of maybe that's something we should do on our own, is take a look at it with respect to the proposed design guideline criteria, I should say, and see if it works. Might be worthwhile. Okay.
Another recent one would be Hasselquist.
Yeah.
Sebring Kelly project is another newer house. The chapel, that wasn't a real major project over east.
Yeah,
The chapel.
Well, he ended,
Yeah. I'm sorry.
he ended up with basically just raising the roof a little bit. He didn't end up.
Yeah, he did a lot of landscaping and it's
Well, yes,
very
yeah,
long,
he made that look
nice.
very nice.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so we could look at a few projects in light of these.
This probably happens every time new commissioners go to trainings, but I learned a new word at the training we went to last week, and it's form-based guidelines. And I didn't know, I feel like, and as I understand those, and please continue to educate me on these, they're kind of almost pictures of what you want things to look like. And I didn't know I feel like that's one of the things that I struggle with when trying to determine what our small town character is is that something we could look into and take pictures of a particular street or a few homes or just some diversity of design? And these are the kind of things that we think fit here. It's eclectic and it's, continuity. So I didn't know, and I recognize that's not a good way to try and complete this and move this on. But I just learned the term, so apologies.
Yeah, I think, yes. So, and it's not just houses, it's streets, which, your streetscape or cross-section kind of thing. I'm not super familiar with the form-based codes, but they are definitely becoming more and more used. And they are, that kind of thing is used commonly in design guidelines. So, I believe City of Carmel has one that's like that, where, but it's, their design guidelines are way beyond what Trinidad would need. And so I haven't used that as an example, but that would be one you could look at and I think you could do that on a scale, in Trinidad. In Carmel, they get into a lot of things that we don't get into as much in Trinidad, but certainly the housing, siding and architectural features and, colors and bulk and orientation and those sorts of things. Certainly, if you have examples of things that are good, I don't know if you want to. And you can have bad examples, maybe not from Trinidad. If you want to.
Might even have some bad examples here.
But things that aren't appropriate for Trinidad. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that's so subjective. It's not something I've felt I should dive into, but if someone wants to do that, I mean, certainly the city could hire an architect or somebody who does that kind of thing, or it can come from the planning commissioner. Well, I can certainly help. Just that I don't feel like I should go around Trinidad saying this is what houses in Trinidad.
Well, I think in our site, in our design review, when we review a project, they want the structure and the colors and the landscape to all fit. And so is that form-based?
Yeah, it's
simpler.
Yeah. And then it's maybe not a 10-foot setback, but it's a spacing, a general spacing between structures.
I guess why I like that concept is, and I don't know if in practice it would be interesting to talk to cities that have that, but it's frustrating, I'm sure, for the applicant far more than us that have to sit up here and make these decisions, but they put all this time and effort into what they try and interpret out of our very gray, non-specific guidelines, and then come to us like, well, that's not really what we were envisioning. So we can give them examples. And, I used to think that was more an issue for new construction, but we just had a recent example where it was a remodel, which is very likely in this town. New construction is unlikely, but remodels are, and upgrades are very likely. And if that's something the commission is interested in, I'd be willing to work on that. But
I nominate her to be form-based.
But it would need to be something that, and if the commission, that's a neat idea, let's kick that down the road that's fine too.
I do, a number of years ago, it was an internship project, but they did an architectural survey of Trinidad. It was fairly informal, but I'll send you what I had. I kind of, that it did every house in Trinidad, and I think it did quite a few houses in Trinidad.
I'd certainly be interested in learning a little bit more about it.
Yeah, me too.
So if you're willing to do that,
yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
We'll make some cake after you do.
Fantastic. That's a deal then.
I didn't like, in regards to that Vanderpool project, that stuff that was already decided about that house in 1978, here we're revisiting, where it was full on said, this house needs to stay low profile. this house shouldn't be spread out, this shouldn't be blocking neighbors' views. And now we're having to redo the same thing again. I'd like to have it some way that we could just say for the future, this is how it is. You know, you just don't do that. You think about your neighbors. And
I think you could. I think you could, for a project that's particularly sensitive or particularly sensitive location, you could require a condition that's some sort of restriction about the size. That at least then would give people notice. I think it would be hard to tell, to say, well, in 40 years, because that was 40 years ago, right? They can't.
But that's why we're doing things, is to set a precedent for the future. And in 1978, the Trinidad General Plan, I took pictures of that, of what was presented at that, and I thought, this is laid out really well. And why are we redoing the same thing over and over again? And I could share the pictures, the screenshots of what, how he presented the cases of like, yeah, this is affecting my views. And I don't know, I just thought it was well laid out. It should be right front and center. If you're going to pull a permit, you got to look at this. How's it going to affect that and that? How's it going to affect your neighbor's view of Trinidad Head?
Well, I think we spoke the words that they needed to hear.
Okay, any other general comments before we move into the specifics of the design review, chapter 17? Okay. Feel comfortable just going through it page by page very quickly? Okay.
You keep adding very quickly.
It's always a goal.
Good.
Eternal quest.
That's a good goal.
Okay, page 1. Anything on page 1?
I just had a question under 17060020, the second bold pointed bold. You refer to two sections, 0.072 and 0.74. I could not find those, so I don't know if those links need, or those references need to be updated in the municipal code. It seemed to just go right from 70 to 80.
Yes, because those are the new exemptions that we were working on.
Got it. Okay.
So they are not.
I was trying to remind myself what the exemptions were that would fall under that. Okay. All right.
And obviously in that same chapter, the second line there where it says grading permit, landscaping, that there's something that's missing or is supposed to be there.
Oh, well, so that was one of my questions for the planning commission, and I think that's kind of a bigger picture question, is what do you want? Landscaping hasn't been required to be part of the design review in the past. I think it should be.
I'll second that.
Grading, currently, if you're changing elevations by more than 2 feet, it does require design review. So those are things. So grading and buildings are currently what require design review. But are there other things? So that's sort of a placeholder if there are things. As we update the zoning ordinance, we might add, landscape permits, stormwater permits. I'm not sure all else, but so that's sort of a placeholder as we update the zoning ordinance. Sure, we include all the permits that should be subject to this.
Well, I recall that either in the design review or the criteria or the element itself, that there was something about that landscaping would be reviewed in order to understand the maximum growth of landscaping. I don't know where that is. Maybe anybody knows where it is right away.
I know where it is.
But does that cover it then? Is that what what else would we?
It probably is fine, but again, it's just a placeholder as we go through and update the zoning ordinance. There might be other permits that. we
I see. Okay. Okay.
I guess in that same line or the line below, I guess I would say vegetation removal or major vegetation removal does not need design review. The landscaping should, I guess, but
What page are you on?
still on page
Still
one.
page one.
Okay.
1760-20.
Just a question, are those necessarily two different things, or could be a circumstance where large, but is part of landscaping?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. Are they really two separate things? I mean, yeah, right. If you're removing, say you want to re-landscape, you're going to have vegetation removal and then planting something. But I guess I wouldn't want to have a design review on the existing vegetation. It would be more like what they want to change it to.
I could see, if someone has a lot of vegetation that's screening something and they want to take it out, then all of a sudden you're going to see this something. Is that something you want to review?
I just want it out.
I'm with that.
Yeah.
No, I don't think that needs to come
Yeah,
down. I feel like people should be able to landscape. This is kind of getting off into the landscape review, but be able to do what you want.
Yeah, they can do what they want, but we were talking about it, and I've been talking about it for 8 years now, the height. And then the vegetation maintenance. So vegetation removal and maintenance is different from landscaping. And landscaping to be what they want to do when they're building something that they want us to see. And then we just need to somehow get them to cut the vegetation. And we did a good job in those, in the writing all those items in the design review for landscaping. So I definitely want to chat about those.
I think, for landscaping, so the major vegetation removal does require CDP, but that's not necessarily design review.
Can you refresh me, sorry, what that definition is, what qualifies as major vegetation removal?
Yeah, we talked about that not too long ago. So it's trees of a certain size, a certain number. If it's multiple trunks, it's a certain cumulative size.
Is there anything non-tree that we put in there? I just can't remember right now.
There was a square foot requirement.
500 square feet.
500?
Sorry, major, vegetation.
Yeah. Something like that.
But with the landscaping, I think, there are requirements now we need to look at. And maybe it's not design review, maybe it's more a building official reviews it, or I review it, but it's, it has to be kind of drought tolerant. It has to be drip irrigation now. So there are these requirements that we do need to incorporate into our permit process. It doesn't necessarily need to be design review.
Well,
maybe it's
we're the
only
ones that look at
it's a
the
certain
projects
chance.
compared to the building officials here 1 day a week.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think it's something that this group has
As I
a
see
lot of
it,
interest in.
if there's a big hedge on somebody else's property that's next door to you, and if they cut it down, do they need to get a permit to do it? Or do you need to give them permission to be able to do it? I think they should be able to do whatever they want, and then you can plant something within reasonable guidelines to replace it. And that's my take.
The big problem is they won't take it down if you want.
And if they don't want to take it down, then it'd be reasonable, as in that last
I'll be
thing that we
back.
looked at.
After a month.
Everything's reasonable.
Well, there again, we should go back and look at views and vegetation ordinance because
Before I leave,
I'm sorry.
before my term's up.
Need another turn.
No,
Okay. So where are we with the landscaping? What are we doing?
So I'm going to take out vegetation removal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
On that page, under purpose, letter B, I guess I found that to read almost exactly the same as on page 2, letter C, number 1. I guess I thought they were, we only need that in one of those 2 places, or maybe I was misreading, but.
I think you're right. I think it's not particularly a purpose. It's probably fine in C1. Doesn't have.
It even says it's not.
Yeah.
Well, the purpose is to demonstrate it's not a purpose. Okay, anything else on page 1?
So is that fine, taking out B?
I think everyone agrees, yes.
Zoning administrator, is that one of those terms we need to pin down?
Yeah, so that's basically me at this point.
I just suggested anywhere we see zoning administrator, we put city planner
Well, we're gonna define it.
or whatever.
Yeah, because maybe the city might have a planning director or something. that person. So we'll just define zoning administrator. I think we have a definition in our glossary. I forget what it is, but I think it's just set by the city council.
Okay, moving on to page 2. Anything on page 2?
Yeah, under site planning at the bottom, number 1, maximize preservation of mature trees. I would just say mature. I want to say native trees. That's just in case there's, lettuce or good heaven or something.
What about like a large cypress?
I'd stick to my native. And I guess if that would be up to the landowner if they want to preserve that, but I don't know that we need to advocate for that as the commission. And then in that same site planning category, I guess I sort of think that, and I don't have an answer for this, but the maximizing the preservation of mature trees is sort of, or potentially in conflict with maximizing solar gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would rather, for being in Trinidad, maximize solar gain like the sun.
Well, and I think that's, these findings are written.
Are newly written.
Well, they're newly written.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is so that you can consider both. This doesn't necessarily provide a preference. And then that's up to you on a case-by-case basis, or you could set a preference.
So you'd cut the big trees but leave the solar panels? I got all that in my neighborhood. Both. Big trees and solar panels. No window look out.
I mean, I guess one would be in there if someone's gonna basically just strip the lot of all the vegetation and trees. I think maybe scenic drive as opposed to in town, or Berry Road. And so
Or Highway 299.
that wouldn't, maybe that's not something you wanna see, but if someone is going to remove some trees so that they can have solar panels that are economical, then that would fit within as opposed to the cutting a lot.
Okay. I guess we can leave it as is.
I was thinking in C1 that it's for what the reviewer is going to do. The decision maker shall apply the following principles. Why does substantial expense incurred to do something good? I mean, I was thinking of maybe taking out the substantial additional expense incurred.
I'm not following, where are you, Tom?
In C1, I
Oh,
think
C1, I'm
that's,
sorry. Yeah, okay.
you know, if someone's proposing, I don't know, hardy plank or something, and someone says, well, we think you should have cedar shingles. So, I don't know what the expense difference is, but I think that's the idea, is that you don't wanna, or say they're doing a brick retaining wall, and you say, oh, no, you should face it with marble. That's the idea there.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I got you. And then the appropriate design is not based on economic factors alone. That's in number 3. That seemed kind of redundant.
But I think that one is saying it can go either way, really, that just that something doesn't have to be expensive to be a good design. But I think it's also saying that just because something is more expensive doesn't mean you can't require it. So it's not, you know, you don't want to double the price of someone's construction, but if it's a matter of, you know, if it's a significant aesthetic improvement and not a huge cost, I think maybe that's justifiable, I think is what that's saying.
I think that's already covered in other things, isn't it? Do I bringing cost into it? I guess is my question. Bringing money into it where it's already covered in something else to make it look good within the neighborhood. I don't care. I'm just talking about it, just thinking about it, and we can keep it in if you like it. You get to enforce it.
Yeah, but these are the main findings, Tom. And then we go into the specifics, site planning, landscape, yeah.
I have a question on substantial, kind of where the planning commission feels that, and that's, I think, where I have a question. I think I kind of get the point that we want to leave open the door or the option to require things that might incur additional expense, right, in order to pass our design review. But at the same time, we don't want to have, you know, we're kind of trying to strike that balance that, you know, building in one direction is less expensive than building in the other direction, and the other direction is better for the community character design, whatever it might be. Are we pinning ourselves down by putting this in here? Are we trying to leave ourselves flexibility that if we don't bring it up at all is kind of inherently in the document? That makes sense. You know, I want to build this direction, but that's going to be a more expensive septic system than if I build the other direction on my lot.
Well, that's kind of what's happening with Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, substantial, significant, those are somewhat subjective. I mean, they are defined. We use them in CEQA, for example, quite a lot.
In terms of economics?
Yes. Okay. You know, or feasible, you know, what is feasible? There's some legal precedents for that, for example. But I think it's, so, I mean, I think that's something to think about is, you know, how much formula do you want in these findings and how much flexibility? And it's a balance between, you know, you're going to have to use your subjective decision-making every time, and it's going to be difficult versus kind of setting these rigid standards that are not as flexible. And it's a tough balance to strike.
They need to be set because they're set in the buildings. You know, how tall, how far back, square footage, all that. So they need to be set. People need boundaries and direction. And this is the plan for the city, you know, so that we can live here in this seaside small town.
So you could put a a number, 5% or something, but I think it's, do
60.
you want to tie yourself down to that? Because it might depend on what improvement you're talking about.
So I'm wondering if maybe we should just strike or substantial additional expense occurred. So just
What
make,
number, Richard?
and we're still on C1, I believe, right?
Okay.
So take out the whole idea of difference in cost, because it says that the regulation exercise should be that necessary to achieve the overall objectives as set forth in section so-and-so. And then item 2 is appropriate design is based on the suitability of a building for its purposes, et cetera. So I agree, if we don't have to deal with the cost issue, then it becomes strictly up to us to determine the aesthetics of the design. So I'd be willing to take that out altogether and just say it has to meet the overall objectives.
I second that.
And do you want to leave in 3?
If you take that out, then I think 3 is okay. It is just reinforcing the idea that we're not looking at this strictly on the basis of cost.
And that shouldn't be our job.
Well, I think that's what we're saying. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I like those.
Reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else on 2?
Maximize number 5, A5 down there. Maximize solar on the neighboring properties and.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
They should either all have ands or none have ands.
Yeah. Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay. Page 3. On page 3.
Yeah, grading number 4. I make sense of my notes here, but I guess that last phrase, but reconfiguring the building profile is preferred if feasible. I guess I don't think that belongs there, or we can just get rid of that. I feel like it's not part of the grading. It's not related to grading. That would fall under size and bulk or architectural side. Just
Is that trying to say that we would rather they redesign the building than cut into the earth?
Yeah.
The intent behind it? Okay.
So I think it fits. It is something that comes up in Trinidad in terms of, a hillside. Someone's got their house in mind. Like, for example, someone was just asking, well, I want 26 feet and the limit's 25. Well, you could dig your house. I mean, that's just a foot, so that's not a big deal, probably. Lower your house. Or you could reconfigure it and step it down a little bit. So
It's not going to be able to find. And then there was that guy on the hill that was trying to do something. Right above the parking lot down at the beach. It was been back.
Yeah, they did a retaining wall. We're still working through that.
Did they get a permit? So yeah, let's leave this.
all right, we'll leave.
So we're happy with that.
Okay.
Anything else on 2?
Well,
The 3?
I like to talk about cultural resources. New development shall respect the cultural heritage of Trinidad and shall be decided and designed to minimize impacts to cultural and historical resources. Okay, so at the community workshop, I met the cultural resource guy. Is he a planner?
Ethan?
Ethan. He's great. He's going to help us with the cultural resources element and, for the general plan. And I was so excited. He's just very upbeat, and I think he's going to do, a really good job. And that was exciting because I don't think you may have said you've got help and we're going to be doing, we're working on this, but I didn't really know what. And so I asked him, the housing guy, different questions, and then he came over and introduced himself.
And I think Ethan is a really great resource.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting to work with him for the city. And then a couple nights before that circus of the Humboldt Planning Commission, that whole Schneider and that whole process, one of the commissioners brought up, and it was a lady, she brought up the fact that in your plans or your design that somebody's presenting, for a building or a site, there should be a cultural resources checklist, which I thought, you might bring that up to Ethan, and that would have been great for the removal of the Trinidad Memorial Lighthouse, and the fact that we didn't know all this about the Chirasai, and then Tom wanted to know all about that. But if we would have had like a checklist, and I wouldn't even know what to put on the checklist, but I'm sure Ethan would, but it's a very sensitive matter. And so I just thought, we would talk about some kind of a cultural resources checklist, and I don't know if we're going to include it or
I think that's a good idea. I think, and I think we are headed in that direction. I have been working on the cultural resources element, and Ethan's been helping with that. And I'm to the point I want to start meeting with the tribal entities and get their input before bringing it to the planning commission. But then eventually there'll be some regulations that go along with that.
Well, and then maybe they can give you some ideas of what to put on the checklist.
Yes. Yeah.
And then Ethan could come when we get to that element, and then, we could ask him questions because he's got it,
So Diane, are you suggesting any changes to this section?
Well, just maybe, joint sightings, I don't know how you could write in there, use of the cultural resources checklist, or some kind of wording.
Well, it sounds that would be appropriate in the cultural resources element.
Oh, okay, I'm not here. Okay.
Yeah, but we might get to a point where we bring some more of that into these guidelines at some point. Yeah, through that process.
Yeah, because, it's going to come up. It's going to be, okay.
Okay, good.
It's just hard for me, Richard, to get them in the right place.
I understand. Sure. And, all these things kind of are a big puzzle. Lots of dangling edges right now. Anything else on 3?
Yeah, I feel like Diane may have actually said this in a previous meeting, but the cultural resources section, what if we move that to the first, so it was letter A, for site planning? Just put that first.
For greater emphasis?
Yeah, for greater emphasis. It's like that's step 1, really.
Anything else?
I'd straddle bottom of 3, top of 4.
Sure.
The 2,000 square foot section starts on E1A and goes into page 4, the top there. I guess we have these limits in here, 2,000 and 4,000 for residential versus commercial. So I'm questioning the necessity for the sentence continuing past the word community. So limit them shall be considered out of scale with the community, period, end of sentence, and then remove the section that, well, but maybe, I think somebody's welcome to come and talk to us about that. But I think, I don't know, my preference would be if we're going to put a number in there. We could have a number in there instead of kind of leaving it wiggly like that.
That's the current wording.
Right.
There aren't many houses in Trinidad less than 2,000 square.
So then should we adjust that? Just my point is, if we're going to have a number, let's have a number. And if 2,000 isn't appropriate, then.
Well, and I think that was the purpose of the 10 and 25% is that, if you're on a acre lot, then a bigger house is appropriate. If you're on, 6,000 square foot lot, then maybe something smaller than 2,000 square feet. I kind of like it how it is because I think it gives you a box at least, the 2,000 square feet, but it gives you some wiggle room around that. So because if we didn't have the box, people would come in with, I think, much bigger houses.
20,000.
But I do think that 2,000 is,
Reasonable. Or not.
I guess it depends on.
Well, depending on where it is too.
Yeah,
It's not on, if it's on scenic, or we talked about this before, it's scenic or you brought it up, or in town.
Just wanted to talk about it, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important one.
It is.
I think it's one that we haven't had as many problems with as some of the others. So I wasn't as inclined to change it, but it's absolutely an important one. I think the square footage is a big issue, and it does a lot of conversations in Trinidad have been around kind of the bulk and the size. And I also think, also the way floor area is measured. So I don't necessarily want to encourage someone to, keep their house at 2,000 square feet, but then they have this huge garage and a workshop and all these other things that don't actually count towards your square footage. We could change the definition of square footage. I do remember a project on Wagner where basically they had a huge attic and they created living space out of that attic. So they did not change the bulk of the house at all, but it ended up, I think, over 3,000 square feet, even though they didn't add on to the structure. They just did living space.
I used the foundation.
Well, it was just they finished it. They finished unfinished space basically inside the structure.
I like this because thinking of an example of the house that was built at the corner of Hector and Edwards. Forget the name of the house. They all had names, but it was initially designed as a 2-story house. And
the
Marshall House, thank you. Yeah. So the point being is that the way in which we were able to work with the owner to make it a 1-story house was based on the fact that the bulk is not obtrusive and the building is consistent with other design standards. It would have been the only 2-story house in the entire section right there, as I recall. And it would be blocking a lot of view from the people on Underwood and up further on Hector. So I guess my point is, and what I guess I'm saying is that house, I think, is over 2,000 square foot.
I'm sure it is. And that was part of the compromise is I think
exactly.
They spread things out and move things around to get their square footage, but still lowering the height and
Thank you.
Let's see, page 4. Go ahead.
Under views, number 1, we don't have a definition for visually degraded areas. And I guess I'm inclined to just eliminate the end of the sentence and put the period at, and restore and enhance scenic views, period. Or where feasible, but maybe remove the visual degraded areas. I don't really know what that is.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be visually degraded to be able to enhance the view.
Right.
Yeah.
Would this be the right place for there to be any language about views from roads and trails and public spaces? As I read through these, I saw really kind of private view. I know we're.
Yes. So I think that's partially covered in 1, but this was where I, for number 2, I left it, I think for private views, but this is where I need to get some input from the Coastal Commission on how to deal with this, because the Coastal Act protects public views and not private views. The private views are
the issue.
a bigger issue to Trinidad. So whether we can combine them or keep them separate or how we're going to do that, I do have a question.
And A still stands.
Yeah, I mean, I think we picked that date because there is a policy in the existing general plan, so it's been in existence since 1978. So that's where that date comes from.
Yeah, my house was purchased in 76. So I have lots of view issues.
So Trevor, are we saying that this whole section is still TBD until we get further direction from CCC? Boy, did you like that?
Well, I mean,
Very nice. Well done.
I think the language is certainly still up for discussion. It's just, where do you put the public views in this?
I guess maybe just a placeholder that's not in here. It is in the element.
Yeah.
Very clearly stated, and it's completely absent from the municipal code. And I mean, we just had a project come before us, and that was one of the concerns and one of the findings, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Was that it affected public views as well, so.
And whatever just says public, and I add private and private.
Now, what we're doing in the general plan is using a city symbol for policies that aren't part of the LCP. Maybe that would work in the zoning ordinance too.
A city symbol?
Yeah, just to designate that it's not part of the certified LCP.
Great. Anything else on 4? Moving on to 5. I have one comment under paragraph K, utilities. It says new development should include underground utility service connections where feasible. And that's okay, if that's probably a state word. However, it's inconsistent with CD 2.6, which was on where did I, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I'm going forward. My apologies.
Utility services for new development.
Yeah, I lost it. Where was it?
Page 4 of the.
Page 4.
Yeah. That should have a where feasible.
What letter was that? G?
CD 2.6, we're in the design element, the next.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. But to me, it wasn't consistent.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
Yeah, I kind of jumped ahead. I'm sorry. My note was to go forward and I was thinking we were still in this
So we're not in that yet? right?
No.
Thank you.
Right.
Because I know I'm older than everybody. We're on page 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else on 5?
Yeah, materials and colors, number 5. In terms of materials, can we add natural materials to that? Which maybe just to include wood, basically. Which may
Which one was that? 5? Sustainable recycled. You gotta keep using those words, so. The words of the world now.
Anything else on 5?
Do we want to touch no digital and signs? Except for the school.
Yeah, there's a digital one going into Eureka, a neon, really.
So specifically, where are you talking, Tom?
Location, number 2.
Yeah, I think there was further on, we talk about in the element itself. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my thought was, and I was going to mention this when we got to the element, is I thought that what we said about signs in the element is rather specific, and maybe it would be better. A lot of that could just go right into the design criteria.
And I think that was where we were getting kind of bogged down in the element, is that we kept talking about these details, and I kept saying, well, those details should be in the design elements. Yeah. And so then we did the design element, and I haven't actually reviewed them for consistency. But yes, I think that those signs, and I think there's another one in here too, is probably too specific. Maybe we took lighting.
And I think to Tom's point, I think in the element, there is a remark about digital signs.
There is.
Which could just get moved into the criteria.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on 5? 6.
Under lighting, this came up recently, light pollution. That's kind of maybe a 6th consideration, M.6 perhaps. Being aware of light screening, there was a lot of commentary with the Vanderpool project. To go back, it's just the most recent of the few examples we have. But that projection up there that was proposed, there was some concern expressed over light pollution that would give.
Oh, for the catwalk or whatever, not the catwalk, what's it called? Crow's nest.
And I don't know, or maybe that's already in here and we just didn't. I guess the question is, do we feel like we need to kind of line out that concept, or is that captured under lighting already?
It is. It's really all exterior lighting.
Oh, so number 4 wouldn't cover it?
Yeah, or number 3.
Well,
Three.
I guess interfere with public vistas. The light mounting and height, I think, probably refers to exterior, but.
There's really nothing for an interior on, and I don't know that that's, but it came up and it was one of the concerns.
I think interfere with public vistas. I think that that's part of it. But
We could also just add exterior and interior lighting, mounting and height shall be designed to minimize light spill, sky glow, and glare impacts.
Yeah.
Does not cause glare off site. You're saying in that sentence, M1, exterior and interior, is that where you were to?
and
I was actually looking at 3, but it could go, probably 3 better.
I think it could be incorporated into 1 too. It does sound.
Yeah.
So it does not cause glare off site, because that was the kind of direct concern to that particular feature.
Right. Exactly.
I could just cross out exterior from 1.
But interior?
Just
say lighting.
Okay.
number 3. I mean, that's really, I don't know if that's about the light mounting and height or if it's more about windows.
It's kind of broad.
I'll think about that.
Anything else on 6?
Yeah, in P, landscaping.
Yeah, I have.
I think I want to emphasize using native plants in there. Just don't have that. I didn't see that in there. Talk about drought tolerant.
Yeah, and I believe that is a CD policy as well.
So you escaped from, you're on
Six. Yeah, 6.
1?
Paragraph P.
Well, I don't know exactly where it would go.
It might be a new one.
So what did you say?
I think there is something in C.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I think
Native
it's
drought
talked about it a lot.
So new development shall be required to utilize native drought
I
tolerant.
think it is. So in number 1P, landscaping shall not be allowed to reasonably block views, be expected. Height and scale of the vegetation at maturity shall be considered. How?
Would the vegetation ordinance theoretically answer that? Or be a good place to answer that?
No,
Because there's no height or scale.
no, I think it's, the landscape plan should be required to show vegetation at maturity.
A demand of height or whatever.
I mean, that's a tough one.
It is really tough.
I'm not an advocate for a height limit because you can have a huge tree that you can see just fine under. So
I think that the key to me is that it's something that we have to consider, you know, in the landscaping and, you know, in the whole design review process. So I like the idea of having something in there about reviewing landscaping at maturity, but we can always discuss issues like what's the proper way to trim a specific tree so that you can see under it or see through it. And it can be an actual enhancement to a view as we all know. Or over it, yeah, depending upon, you know, the height of it. So I like having something in there to say, to look at the landscaping, you know, at the mature level. That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Richard.
And one more for P1. At the end of the first sentence, adding something effective, landscaping shall not be allowed to unreasonably block views from both public and private view sheds or whatever the right terminology there is. I feel like that's an opportunity to, again, spell that out as something that's important.
Let's put private first. Fine.
Well, I think that's going to be somewhat dependent on the discussions with the CCC. I mean, I don't know which direction they're going to go.
yeah, and how we define
I'm going to
views.
try and get on the CCT.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then everybody can have what they want with short trees.
Okay. Moving on to page 7. Anything on page 7?
I'm also going to do the civic club.
I had some thoughts under the review procedure.
Sure.
Beginning towards the bottom after 1776 TMC, where view considerations are involved, adding language in, and because private views are afforded some level of protection or something along those lines, the applicant is required prior to the submission of a complete application to contact their neighbors within 100. I just feel like that's really important. Otherwise, you know, Vanderpool's 2.0 and other people are going to come to something that hasn't, they're going to go through this expense that really they should, the first stop should be with their neighbors. And then with that, story polls. I don't know, is that a policy that the city manager can enact? Does that need to be an ordinance? Or I took a picture of some story polls when I was down in Mill Valley recently that are really quite depictive of, was like a nice example. I know I sent a couple things.
Yeah, I have, so what I gave you is the last version you guys saw and want to make changes to it, but I did, since then, I have added a section for story poles, based on some of the stuff you sent me. I think that that's important. I think for now, it's basically, I think the planning commission has made it very clear that you're not going to approve projects without story poles.
Right.
So that's, I just,
I'd like to specify what we want them to look like too,
yeah, and how long.
and have some standard, how long they're up, those
And
types
some
of things,
standards for accuracy, yeah.
right? But it's
So yes,
supposed
so I
to
do
pick.
have that in a new version, so I'm gonna add a section on story.
And then I don't know how the other commissioners feel about requiring notification where it's likely to have you.
Well, we won't look at their plan unless they.
Well, they bring it before us, we
I
look
think it's
at
fine, and then, and then when we develop the application checklist based on these new guidelines, one of those will be that you notify property owners and submit proof. We do require that for the views and vegetation ordinance.
Okay.
Put it at the top of the checklist.
Good point. Okay, anything else on page 7? Okay, that's, at this point, let me see if there's any public comment, and it looks like we've pretty much lost our public, have we? But I will open it up for public comment. Hearing none, bring it back to the commission. Okay, so I'm going to take a 2-minute break.
No, 5.
I'm sorry, what?
5 minutes.
Oh, 5, okay. A 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll tackle the design element, community design. Okay. Okay, page 2. I had a couple of just comments under background. 1, 2, third line down, it says the southern and western view sheds along the coastline, particularly from Edward Street, provide a important visual resource. That's certainly true. I don't have any problem with that, but I'm not sure why we want to single out Edward Street. We have fairly nice views from Wagner and Underwood. Now, Wagner is a little bit iffy because some parts are private, but I still thought I might either remove Edwards or include other streets as well. I mean, Underwood still has some beautiful views too. Anything else on?
They probably, is that in there because that's the way in?
It's the primary, probably public view. But it's only a section of Edwards though. I think it's fine to take it out.
Yeah, I like striking it out.
Yeah,
Trail access is off of other streets as well, so.
anything else on 2? Okay, moving on to page 3.
Yeah, under CD 1.3, letter J. I guess that one, like, after reading A through I just felt J was just, it's either just a summary of all the ones above or sort of like a repetitive. Like, I feel like if you met A through I, you're definitely going to meet J or, yep. But also, maybe this was one of the things that is a little too specific for the element. Maybe it would be better moved into the design.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's either, because I think the whole idea is that you maintain a high quality of design. So it's either new development that are highly visible from beaches, trails, and open space are held to a higher standard, or just take it out.
I wouldn't take it out.
I like higher standard. Well, you just said, yeah, you can be held to a higher standard.
I had just, I'm not sure I really need to do this, but under CD 1.3, item C, in part, this reads silhouette of existing structures in the area and that roof lines are compatible with other roofs along the street.
They're not.
I guess what my feeling is that we're not really worried about along the street because you could have roof lines on one end of the street that could be of a different height than others. So I would recommend to change that to read roof lines are compatible with nearby roofs or something to that effect. In other words, I think you could see a gradual increase in roof lines along the street, but it might not be compatible if you suddenly had low roof lines and then suddenly a huge roof line and then go back to low roof lines. That's the message I was trying.
And does the concept of roof lines speak to flat roof versus peaked roof versus, that kind of?
Well, we even talk about the slope in here somewhere. Right. Yeah.
But if somebody wants to put a flat roof in it that's not compatible with the, I want to make sure we're not keeping that from being an option because flat roofs can be really appropriate, particularly as you get closer to the coast, closer to the views.
And they've gotten a lot better.
I'm stuck with one.
Maybe you just take out the phrase about the roofs. So leave the silhouettes won't extend above the natural silhouette or existing structures.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then, period, larger buildings should have more varied roof massing.
Because natural silhouette includes the roof.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that, yeah.
We're taking out structures and the roof line.
and the roof lines are compatible with other roofs along the street.
I had a really minor under the intro to CD 1.3, that second comma after including new and modified landscaping. When I first read it, I took pause there. I was like, well, wait a minute, that seems, it kind of stopped me. And then when I read the rest of it, it has the potential to affect visual resources. I don't know if taking that comma out makes it read a little bit more.
Or maybe it's design review shall be required for all development that has the potential to affect visual resources, including.
That leaves it open to. Yeah, I like that too.
Anything else on 3? 4.
So of course, I have one for CD. Scenic and visual qualities of coastal areas shall be considered and projected as a resource of residential or private and public importance. This town isn't just for the public, you know, it's for the residents. We're trying to keep our neighborhoods. That's what this guy was talking about last night, running for council.
If you just take out public and just said it's important.
Or community important.
Okay,
Under program CD 2.5.1, can we add visual resources as one of the things that's protected by the vegetation management?
Well, I think that is the idea of a vegetation management plan, because it's under 2.5, which is landscaping and vegetation shall be maintained, so it does not.
Sort of purpose. Okay, all right.
My comment on that same paragraph, though, is that's a big deal.
I know.
And I guess I would caution all of us. I guess I would caution all of us to think about whether or not we want to take that on as a city. I mean, how long have we had the Churi management plan, which is right on the bluff and contains a whole bunch of the same things here: vegetation management, bluff side vegetation maintenance. I mean, I don't even know how we're going to do this. I mean, at this point.
You're referring specifically to the parcel at the end there around.
Well, I'm just saying that if we're saying that we want to develop a vegetation management plan for bluff side vegetation maintenance consistent with protections for slope stability, easis, and cultural resources, my head spins.
Well, I think that is a recommendation of the management plan.
and it needs to be a recommendation.
That's exactly my point, but we have been less than successful at making that happen.
So we'll ask, what's that new guy's name, Ethan?
Well, it's an editorial comment. I mean,
Yeah.
all I'm saying is that we can leave it in there, but that to me is, if someone were to come to a city council meeting and say, "Where's your plan?" We would spend the next 20 years on it, I'm afraid.
Well, we
That's all
would
I'm
say
saying.
the city club has a plan, the Churi side has a plan, Diane has a plan, and the city has a plan.
Well, and I guess I would add that I think there's other bluff side areas that might need that kind of consideration
And
off
probably
Pacific. I'm thinking those few homes down there that might not trigger as much of the.
I think that though, as soon as you say bluff,
Right.
you're talking cultural resources.
So let's skip the
You're-
word bluff. Or that's the main word in there, let's see.
So look, I don't want to get, my point is that I'm just saying that to me, as a program, and this goes back to my comments that I made before, I'm really worried about the number of programs that the city is signing up for. And not that I expect anybody to do this, but someone could come in and say, where are all of your programs? And that's a biggie. That's all I'm saying.
I don't necessarily have an issue taking it out. I could compare it with what's in the management plan. And we could add with a word like if feasible.
I guess just reading it again, develop a vegetation management plan or program is in the text of our definition of the program. So is it a plan or a program? Because our program is to give ourselves a plan or a program.
It's a different kind of program.
Okay.
Well, I mean, could we, I guess, downgrade it from a program to, I guess, a recommendation or something, sort of?
Other initiative.
Yeah.
There's weasel words that we can use. There's no doubt. I just am a little concerned making it something that is somewhat concrete could be problematic.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, we could say any vegetation maintenance or any vegetation maintenance plan shall be consistent with protections for slopes through niches.
That would work.
Yeah.
Take the left side out.
Get it down.
Take out the develop a management
Yeah.
plan for bluff side vegetation.
Yeah, I think that's good. For now, Richard. And then in 6 months, you can look at it again. 6 years, just.
Okay. Okay. And just one more comment, of course, we've already talked about, but here's where my reference was back to the criteria for requiring versus feasible
Oh,
under CD 2.6.
I'm going to add an and between those and add where feasible, because both of those are really where feasible.
so are remodels trying to do underground, or they can't?
I mean, that's a huge expense. So
I know, we've been there for years. We don't have the money.
and we haven't been requiring individual underground connections
Okay.
where they're already overhead, because that would be a huge expense. So it really have to be a grant funded kind of public program.
Get the housing people to give us money for underground. I'll be underground by then anyway.
Anything else on page 4? Page 5?
I'm just getting it finally. Paper party.
Yeah, CD 3.5. Can we change it so that it reads minimize disturbance of native vegetation instead of natural vegetation? And then including preservation, I'm going to want to plug for native trees rather than mature trees. Or just remove the trees altogether and just say including preservation of native vegetation. So it's repetitive.
I like the idea of removing the tree comment. That's what we did earlier, I think, right? Talk about removing.
Yeah, we changed it from mature to native right earlier. So I guess we should just do that here.
I had just maybe a clarification or a request for clarification under CD 3.4. I I think I understand what it's supposed to say, but integrate man-made and natural environments by using plant materials to screen or soften the visual impact of new development and to provide diversity in developed areas. Is that diversity for the plant materials?
Probably should be visual interest as opposed to diversity.
Yeah, because it's one group or one house has this vegetation, that next house has that, and the other house has native plants and rocks. What were your words, Trevor?
Visual diversity. That's fine with me. I just was having trouble with the developed areas. Wasn't sure what that meant.
It's a big issue, diversity.
Anything else on 5?
Yes, CD 4.4, if we have all those criteria for signs, that I think we could just move that whole list of A through F into our design criteria. Probably a lot of them are, but some of them are already in our design criteria. I guess that was when we were talking about signs earlier. I just thought in the design element, this C 4.4 was just sort of overly specific for the element, and it just, I mean, it even says their criteria, and I just feel like specific criteria just are better fit into the design criteria.
Absolutely agree.
Okay. And although I do have a question about one of those, or letter B, it says limit copy to icons, logos, services. What do you mean? What does it mean by copy to icons?
I think as opposed to as opposed to a bunch of words.
I interpret that as kind of like just advertising,
Minimize.
like the busy, minimize what's there, not, hey, 2-for-1 sales inside. It's more just, this is business X, it's open from, and like the copy of the sign, I think the design of the sign.
And I do think some of these,
How about the composition of the sign? Would that be more?
That's fine.
Limit
I see
composition of the sign to icons, logos.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a term referring to what's on the sign.
Actually, yeah.
I also think some of these might even be too specific for the design criteria, and that they really should be in regulations. It's set standards. So any of these that are kind of set standards as opposed to kind of design, it should be, it'll probably be standards. Prohibit the use of flashing video, audio, all those things. Well, now that's the question though. You want to prohibit any more digital stuff?
Well, yes and no. I looked at that and I made some weasel words to say something to the effect, but subject to review. And like I said, weasel words, but.
I mean, I do think that, I think that people are going to want those, and I could see the flashing casino sign as what you don't want, but something that's static that maybe changes once a week, once a month might be fun.
Which is essentially the approach we took with the school sign. Yeah.
But I don't know, I just kind of penciled in, prohibit the use as, you know, as it's written. Exceptions may be considered for non-commercial uses. Because that's, to me, the school's a non-commercial use. It's more of a community type thing versus, I don't know that I really want to see in this town, when you first enter our town, a digital sign that says Salty's, Murphy's, Chevron, whatever, that can rotate periodically. I don't know that I want to see a, you know, high-res image of a hot dog.
But that's an icon.
It is true, just not digital. So I don't know, that would be my thought, kind of to help.
Yeah, I like that. Non-commercial, sort of more community oriented, but still may be considered.
Yeah, exceptions may be, yeah, not a guarantee.
Yeah, that worked.
Yeah, because I'm sure Chevron would want to upgrade their sign to a digital sign at some point.
No, they moved to Texas. Check on them.
I guess, what do they have for their price sign now?
Manual.
It is manual. What about a digital price sign?
I mean, yeah, that's what they're gonna want to do. That, I'm sure.
Because the price is legally required of a certain size. Slate. And with gas prices changing as fast as they are.
You can see everything now because they did vegetation maintenance.
Yes, they did.
At Chevron, very nice.
Well, I think one of you said something to the effect that, you know, it could be reviewed, subject to review or something to that effect.
For non-commercial.
For non-commercial, I guess.
Yeah,
You
but
can
then,
say non-commercial and legal notification. I mean, that's almost legal notification.
But then where does that stop? The piece, you have to, you know, 99 cents, the whatever. I don't know. I kind of like leaving it the way it is. And if we come to a point in time where that technology is no longer available, then sure, we need to revisit it. But right now, you can buy manual signs and buy parts for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm fine with forcing them to use manual.
anything else on page 6?
A question on lighting, since it came up earlier, do we need to take a look at those CDs to make sure we capture the intent of the, that we had in the actual
I will
code
look
as far
at all
as
of the.
What page is it on? My notes are-
6?
Page 6.
Specifically, Trevor, meaning, you know, the light leakage, how we change that from exterior to interior. I don't know if there's a natural, trying to find that spot where that would fit in that change. Remember how we took out the word exterior? I just don't. And this is more related to public safety though, too. So I don't know if this lighting is a different lighting than,
Yeah.
No, I think that's good. It's covered in both. There's parking lots are included.
So you're going to take a look at all of the lighting policies to make them
And make those similar changes.
Okay. Make them mesh with the criteria, okay?
do we need consistent with public safety on that goal?
I guess if it's public safety, it's not pollution.
Well, then, I mean, I just in that overarching statement, because then I don't know, something to think about.
I mean, I mean, street lighting, parking lot lighting. I don't know. I'm not a lighting fan myself.
The gray foxes like the lights. They come on.
So,
Around town.
so where are we with minimize light pollution consistent with public safety? You say you want to remove.
I'm just thinking the goal should be to minimize light pollution, and then our policies down below kind of address public safety, that kind of stuff. But I think putting consistent public safety at the beginning there kind of limits us a little bit potentially for our goals.
So the goal could just be minimize life.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
The consistent with public safety part is
Well, that's
kind of confusing, actually.
well, and it's embedded in CD 4.5, sorry, 5.4.
And 5.1 mentioned, yes.
And
yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
okay. Anything else on 6? Okay, 7.
You should highlight 6.2.
6.2.
Would you like to borrow my highlighter, Diane?
No, I got one. I'm going out.
Well, the nice thing here, it does reference the views and vegetation ordinance.
Yeah, that's what I want you to highlight.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Got it. I'm highlighting that. 7.
C 6.3 requires property owners or commercial property owners to maintain required landscaping. Is there a required, what is a required landscaping?
There is, that's pretty standard in commercial, like parking lots. For every number of parking spots, you have to have a tree, 2% of the area is landscaping, things like that. Sometimes like screening of like trash bins and things like that, you would want vegetation. So it's not something that comes up a lot in Trinidad, but it is, we do have it in our ordinance, I think. And we'll keep it.
Well, they have fences and they have little roofs, so they're different.
I mean, that could be an alternative. It doesn't have to be vegetation, but if it was required, it should.
Yeah, check out the chevron. It's just board and by a woman. I saw her doing it. I told her good job. Because you can see the price now, the gas.
Anything else on 7? Page 8.
So what would important community resources, what that can be?
Where are you, Diane?
Goal CD7.
Okay.
So that's art and what else? Oh, it'd be the cemetery, the church side, the church, the lighthouse.
Maybe cultural resources, there's a policy 7.4. So I think that's kind of a catch-all.
Right, yeah, I think that's fine. The okay, so consider implementing an ongoing CD 7.3.1. Consider an ongoing outdoor sculpture exhibit adjacent to the city hall or in other locations to support and showcase local artists and reflect the cultural life of the community. So does that mean intertwine here and there? Is that what that one means? Whether it's a whale or a bench or
Turkana does something like that. They have rotating sculptures. So do just something like that to highlight different artists. And maybe that's really another initiative. It's kind of worded pretty flimsily.
But at least in this case, it's considered.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because it's just, it'll be more stuff, fountains, murals.
That's a little more specific than the other.
Public gathering places. Beach.
any other comments?
Yeah, there's 2 CD 7.4s.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, and then going back to CD 6.3, I'm going to continue to plug for native vegetation. So when it says replace unhealthy or dead landscaping, can we replace it with native/drought tolerant landscaping?
Which one?
Yeah, I think that would be
Oh, that's a
in
6. Oh, at the top, okay.
That will probably be in the regulations that there has to be native landscaping, but I think it should be consistent with what was originally required.
Okay.
Something,
All right.
something like that.
6.4.
Anything else on 7?
Just a tweener between 7 and the top of 8. Are those 2 bullet points necessary? The other community design initiatives, are they kind of incorporated elsewhere in the document? The local beautification efforts by neighborhood merchant groups, I think that's, I feel like with the art displays and things like that, that's kind of there. And properties are well maintained and nuisances are abated. We have that in our.
Wishy-washy, yeah.
Yeah, I want to get rid of them too.
Yeah.
Both of them?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go for 6.3. Like Murphy's parking lot. Is there any landscaping in there?
Couple of roadies on the corner.
On the periphery of the parking
Well,
lot.
there's that little dirt triangle that people drive over.
There's little bushes against, I don't know, go City of Murphy's.
And I don't know if that was required or if it's
There's no
from
room for it.
predates.
Look at the parking, there's just no room.
I was just thinking about existing, like say Chevron, they have existing landscaping.
Yeah.
Should we require them to replace it with native landscaping?
Well, there's landscaping from the post office to the,
Encourage instead of require. I mean, we want them to have landscaping.
Because I think for new development, we will require native.
Okay.
Drought tolerant vegetation. But I'm thinking for existing landscaping that they're,
maybe at the end of all the buildings by the pizza parlor, there could be
I guess the problem is you don't need a permit to replace
Sure.
vegetation
Yeah.
that they put in voluntarily.
Right. If something dies, let it
there's a
occur.
bunch of vegetation at the end of the Lighthouse Grill coming in. Rocks and, that roadie's been there as long as I can see.
I don't know that that was required though, or if they,
A lot of things weren't required back in the day. I just did it.
Any closing comments on this agenda item?
So you don't want, what other community design initiatives? So you don't want everybody dropped, ensure that properties are well maintained and nuisances are abated.
that's good, that's.
So Megan, we have other ordinances that cover nuisance abatement and property maintenance. I just don't think that's in place right here.
So we can't put,
I think we have stronger policies elsewhere.
okay. Because there are some nuisances around. I think I really talked about.
Any other final comments on this agenda item? Real quickly, just for formatting, I'll ask for public comment.
Okay.
And we do have someone on public comment, okay? Is there a comment from the public? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is commissioner reports. Any reports from any of the commissioners? Diane?
So next Wednesday, October 26th at 6:00 will be the STR meeting. And I guess it's going to be Zoom, right, Anton? Yes. Okay, so we need to encourage Jack, so great, a new community member, to join the meeting. And since I'm the planning commissioner representative, we need to be thinking about who wants to take my spot in January.
Okay. Good consideration. Any other commissioner reports?
Just water advisory committee is coming up on the 14th. So if you have anything you want me to ask specifically, I know we're going to try and take a dive into the plant and the operation, becoming independent, things like that. So is there anything you want me to bring to them? And then,
Yeah, I have one.
So-
I wanted to trim, the city to trim around the, where we get the water,
Hydrants?
you know. They've done that a couple of times, Aaron. Right, Anton?
I'll bring that up. I'm not sure that's really the purview of the Water Advisory Committee per se,
I know, I just,
but
there's one in Ocean that I've trimmed, and then Kyle trimmed it, and then I think one of the landscape people that were doing some landscape over there, they did it. They just need to be visible. The one on View and East is very visible, and the one on, I think it's the school corner, I don't know. They just need to be visible,
Certainly.
because we don't know who's gonna be putting out the fire if Aaron's not here, right?
What was the date again of
the 14th at 5 p.m.
Okay. Here or Zoom?
Anton?
It's also Zoom.
It's also,
Yeah,
it is,
why are
okay.
they all on Zoom? Because we're not.
It was determined that the committees
Or
would be Zoom and the city council and planning commission, because their decision-making would be hybrid or
Okay.
live.
Thank you.
any other committee reports? Sorry, commission reports?
Still, the calendar is what I want to know for the next meetings. So it'll be like November 17th. Now, what about in December? Are we going to do that week or the week before?
Oh, for planning
For
commission?
planning commission, because it gets into the holidays and, you know, we might, and school's out. So I'm just throwing it out there.
So the November one's early, November 16th.
So the December one, I think it was like the 21st and maybe.
It would be the 21st.
Should be the week before. I don't know, how do you guys feel?
Um,
I'm not that far ahead.
yeah, I can't process that right now.
Okay, well, we need to think about it.
Sure,
for next
understand.
week, 'cause I would like to have it a week early.
Okay.
Just because of the, you know, they talked about last night about getting community involvement, and when school's out, the people are gone. You know, they're busy doing their own little holiday and family activities.
We could, I mean, if we don't have anything pressing, I could cancel the meeting too.
Well, as long
No, it's
as,
my party. We're gonna have a party, we're
On
gonna
the
have a
16th?
barricade.
On the 21st, December?
No, the
well,
14th.
that's why we have to have it the week before so that we have full public participation.
Yeah.
My party was in November.
No, I'm saying my goodbye party. I told you.
Gotcha.
Apologies, just one more thing from me, or I guess Anton or Trevor. There's a few of us, I think, that come due in December for appointments, so I just want to make sure the city council's on top of that. I know I'm up, I believe, December of 22 for my initial appointment to the planning commission.
So I think we'll want a letter saying you want to re-up.
Okay, I don't know, does it go back out to the public again for any interest or no? Okay, yeah, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the process,
I
so.
brought it up. at the
I don't
beginning
think-
of the meeting.
You're going to have a lot of company.
No, I wouldn't think so. I just wanted to make sure it was so that it formally happened. That's all.
Yes.
Well, whatever, we have to abide by the process.
Right. And yeah, I just don't know what it is. So I'm just kind of
Okay, great.
bouncing that back to.
Yeah, I think it has to be noticed.
Probably time to notice.
Going back to the website, though, this is something that should be posted on there. It should have terms.
It's not currently up to date. It's that older version of the website.
Well, that's why, you know, it's almost the end of October, middle of October, so it needs to be done, because once the holiday things come. Lost.
Now, I think usually in an election year, don't they appoint the council first? Although, so the council meeting would be January and then I guess they could appoint you after January.
Okay. Message understood clearly. Staff report?
I am just about ready to submit a main packet of general plan stuff to the Coastal Commission. I've been bugging them about several, the AE ordinance, the exemptions and administrative permit requirements, public versus private reviews. Also the whole, when I started to put that zoning ordinance amendment that we reviewed at the last couple of meetings, with all the housing element updates, the numbering is actually a big issue with that. Because the codified version of the city's ordinances is not the certified. So the numbering between the certified LCP, the certified zoning ordinance, and codified zoning ordinance is different. Now, with something like the STR ordinance, it's all in one section, so we just included both section numbers. That's what I've done in the past. This one is so many section numbers, and the definitions are all in the appendix, so they're not even numbered. So I don't know. So that's another question I have for Coastal Commission staff. So working on the general plan and the SB2 and LEAP grant tasks are my primary focuses. I think we're going to stop collecting the parking data, start putting that parking report together. Yeah, I'm keeping busy.
To the best of your insight at this point, do we have any design review issues that will be coming towards us?
Not in the next, well, I guess there was an application that was just submitted that's pretty simple. They might have a couple of issues with septic and a second unpermitted. Work out though before I bring it to you.
Okay. Okay.
So possibly.
All right.
But no,
No Vanderpool yet.
All right. Future agenda items. We have 5 items which are still on the list. Any changes to that that anybody would like to recommend other than?
I'm going to add the December meeting date next month.
Okay.
Parking ordinance update. Would that fall under us?
I'm going to be working on the report as opposed to.
Sorry, as far as policies, rules, regulations, how long you can stay overnight, is that going to be part of what you're working on?
No.
That's more.
My report is just going to be that sorry, Diane, there's not a parking problem.
There's not a what?
Parking problem.
The specific reason I bring it up for consideration is we've had some challenges recently with some folks that were just virtually abandoning their vehicles, and we're a little bit, we only have a 72-hour, that kind of stuff. I didn't know if it was.
Oh, you do. There is a 72.
There is a 72, yeah. But I've just been looking at other coastal towns and seeing they have some other things that might make folks more understanding of.
I'm open to suggestions if there's an issue. I mean, the parking is a big deal with the Coastal Commission, and I don't want to chase things that aren't necessarily issues. I like the no overnight parking on Edwards. I just don't see it. There just weren't cars parking there overnight. It's not an issue, but to get it through the Coastal Commission is a huge effort.
But
So I want to make sure that we're addressing, a problem on the same level of solution. So, but I haven't heard of these other problems.
We can chat. Yeah. We don't need to put it on there now. We'll chat and then see if it's something you think it's worth investing time in. Something there.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, in our previous meeting, a member of the public, I think it was Mr. Black, mentioned about the sign going down to the harbor. I don't know like how to follow up with him, or if that got directed to the proper, I don't know, to Kyle or somebody to like brush up the sign or something. I guess I feel like, if we're lucky enough to get someone to come to this meeting, we should like,
No, I think that's a good point.
and I don't know how to do that.
I guess I would
Send them a packet.
send it to Eli.
Yeah. And Eli can invite him.
And then Eli can direct public works staff to do it.
Well, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up because we have talked about this in the past, and maybe we should make it a future agenda item. It can be fairly simple, but one of the things that we are negligent on following up on action items. We should probably figure out, or at least have a brief discussion on developing some sort of action item list and periodically review it and make sure that these things are getting done, or pass it off to the appropriate city department to work on. Good point. Yeah.
And where was he tonight?
He's feeling discouraged after the sign hasn't been brushed out yet.
I will not. Okay. Unless there's anything else, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
And if anybody has any suggestions for some sort of tracking system, and I think that is a good idea. I mean, I'll be going through the minutes. And, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I have to follow up, but then the next month, those minutes aren't there.
I think just put it on the future agenda so that we go back to it. But it has to be a bit bigger item. As an agenda item.
But I'm open to ideas.
Yeah, it would be nice if we had some sort of mechanism that we could real easily track them. And
I mean, I could keep a running list. I've started a running list for like STR ordinance amendments.
I think that was the date it entered the list would be a huge step forward, just to kind of.
Just to keep a running list that. I don't know whether it's on every agenda, but.
Easy peasy.